I don't have like a salary requirement or a professional degree requirement or anything like that, but I do want to be with someone who, if he feels he's equal to me, whether or not he has those things or whether or not I make more. I just don't want it to be an issue in my relationship, and I feel like the key to that is a man's confidence.
When it comes to relationships in terms of deal breakers, understanding that there are certain things that are going to be, I'm not going to be flexible on. Like I need these things, and if you can't do these things, then respectfully, we're not moving forward. However, my entire list of items cannot be deal breakers.
Yeah.
Because that would be unreasonable, right? There's always going to be points of compromise, and you said it, and I'm going to echo it, because everybody's not me. Everybody don't see the world that I do, the way that I do. Everybody didn't grow up the way that I did. And I'm going to do my best to articulate and express how I feel and why I see things the way that I do. But just because I do that does not mean that you have to assume my way of seeing things. That's compromise. Because I understand that if I go into a relationship, I'm going to bring my perspective. You're going to bring your perspective. And we're going to try to find a way to meet in the middle. That's what healthy communication would allow us to do, right? So going back to the list, what are some of those items that are on your list in terms of things that you feel would be a deal breaker for you that you cannot compromise on, and maybe some things that you feel you might be flexible with?
My number one deal breaker is accountability. That's like the top number one for my list. To your earlier point about the willingness and how much that matters in terms of a person's just potential and ability to grow and change. For me, someone who cannot apologize, that's a deal breaker. And I am fortunate to have grown up with a parent who could and a parent who couldn't, and that was
Mixed bag.
a lot. Yeah, right. And that was, a lot of the dysfunction that my parents' relationship had was a direct result of my mom's inability to apologize, and my dad's over apologizing to try to compensate for my mom not being willing to take accountability for her behaviors. And so for me, that's number one. A number one deal breaker is like someone who cannot say that they're sorry or admit that they were wrong. I cannot be with that person. Another deal breaker for me is manners. I want to be with someone who is polite and respectful to me and to people around them. So someone in any scenario where a man calls me out of my name, no, we're done. Because in all, my entire life, I never heard my dad call my mom out of her name or even say words like that around me and my sister or my mom. He wouldn't even use like the B word around us, for example, because it was just considered so disrespectful. And part of that is my Southern upbringing. Obviously, like growing up in the Deep South, manners are going to be
of course
top important to me. So that matters a lot too. Like a man who refers to women as B words and has choice words about them, that's a deal breaker. I'm not, any kind of indication that there's a lack of respect for women in general, I am not going to deal with that. So those are my top. Those are the first things that come to mind when I think of deal breakers.
Okay.
I want to be with someone who can apologize when they're wrong, and I want to be with someone who treats me with respect no matter how angry they are. Like it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. We should be able to have a respectful conversation. I know I'm capable of doing that, so it has to be like that with my partner. Things I'm going to compromise on, I would say, are more just kind of the more superficial things. Like something that is important to me that I would like a man that I'm in a relationship to have is like style and being well groomed and really taking care of themselves. Let's say I don't like his style. Okay, I can deal with that. Like, I might feel the urge or the temptation to try to make him dress a different way or wear certain things, but I've matured enough where I'm like, okay, that doesn't, even if I don't necessarily love his personal style, if he meets my other criteria, then that's something I can just deal with. I can deal with, like, I don't know, maybe I don't even have an example, but
his clothing choices.
Yeah. I've dated guys before. I'm like, what is
what did you put together here, man? I don't even know what this is.
Right, exactly. So that's an example of one where I'm like, it matters to me. It's something I notice, but it's not going to be a deal breaker if I don't necessarily like the way he I'm trying to think of another one that is like a nice to have, not necessarily a deal breaker.
What about, is there anything in terms of physical appearance or profession or salary or family dynamic, or like family, maybe upbringing, or actually cultural background? I didn't even throw that one out there. Is there any of those that you're like, yeah, it would be nice, but
Good
like I'm
question.
flexible?
I would say that makes me think of one that is I would say this one is a deal breaker. Confidence,
Okay.
because I feel like a man with the confidence that I'm looking for, some of the other things like salary, for example, or profession will
Hmm.
not be as much of an issue. Because I do feel like that is an issue I encounter as a young professional who has experienced a lot of career success already in her lifetime. And, I'm 25 and I do make like, I'm in the top like 1 or 0% of 25-year-old women earners. And so, based on my like Googling of like, just because
Sure,
I was
sure.
curious. And so that is to say and that's another thing that keeps me a little bit pulled back from the dating world is like that can be a big point of contention between a man and a woman, like the salary, profession kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And even with my parents, like my parents had a really good dynamic as it related to that, but they definitely had their moments where I could tell my dad's ego was a bit triggered by my mom being the one who had like more of the strategic control of our finances and just kind of, realistically being the head of the household in terms of the way things were managed. I could tell that even though my dad was comfortable with her having that role, there were
Yeah.
moments when I saw that it created like friction between the two of them.
Sure,
And
sure.
so for me, I think I don't necessarily need to be with a man who earns more than I do or who has a professional degree, but he does have to be confident and not feel like threatened that maybe I would leave him one day for someone who does have those things, or feel
Sure. Okay.
threatened by my being someone who's ambitious and wants to have a successful career, and ideally one day I want to be a business owner. And so I need to be with someone who is confident enough to support those dreams of mine and not worry that me, being out and about in the world, moving and shaking and networking and just trying to do what I can to achieve my goals is a threat to his security and the security of our relationship.
Okay.
Um, so that's how I would answer your question. Where I don't have like a salary requirement or a professional degree requirement or anything like that. But I do want to be with someone who, if he feels he's equal to me, whether or not he has those things or whether or not I make more. I just don't want it to be an issue in my relationship, and I feel like the key to that is a man's confidence.
No, I can definitely support that. I think for a lot of us, I would say traditionally, for most men, we over identify with our profession. So like in terms of like if you ask them like who are you, the first thing we'll typically say is whatever we do. And so I think for a lot of us, if it can feel emasculating if your partner out earns you, and so you're trying to figure out how to navigate that. I don't think that's necessarily death to a relationship, but I do think you have to have very clear understanding about how each other's roles are. To your point about your father and your mother, so I don't know who out earned who, but if she's making majority of the decisions as a man, that might feel emasculating. So you might feel like I don't get to play the role that I was more or less built to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be very difficult to maintain relationships like that because then we might end up butting heads more often, cause more friction.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's necessarily that you have to have it like that. I would say historically, men would out earn women, and then not to say that women can't earn or can't earn comparably to a man, but I think sometimes there's again, it either can go to this fear mentality or it can go to this I don't need you mentality, which is equally troubling because
Mm-hmm.
then it's like, well, then again, going back to the point that you were mentioning earlier, yes, of course, we can all do this by ourselves. That's not the point. We don't do relationships to say, I need you, I am incapable, like you're my dad or you're my mom. No. So let's just throw that whole argument or throw that whole position out the window. That's not the point of having this conversation. The point is to say it is easier. I would say it is more stable, particularly when you're talking about with families, because it is very, very challenging to do it alone. So I think if you make any compromises there, it wouldn't be a bad thing. You just have to make sure you'd have to have very clear understanding that, for whoever you might give an opportunity to, so they understand what their role is going to be. Because historically, you being more of the provider, a person being more of the financial provider tends to make a lot more of the decisions or be the final say so. But it doesn't mean you're not supposed to talk and communicate and take in both sides before you collectively make a decision. Now, I want to add this part in there because we haven't gotten to it yet, but still somewhat on the concept of dating, we didn't talk about the cultural aspect. Just real quick, do you have a preference there at all or no?
No, I would say I have a really just like a range of what I'm attracted to. And really what it really comes down to is confidence. Confidence is like my top attribute. If someone is confident, even if I am not physically attracted to them at all, I might find myself being interested because of their confidence.
Gotcha.
And so that is to say, the same goes for kind of their background in all aspects, like their cultural background, their education, their profession. If they have the confidence that I'm looking for,
Yeah.
then I'm automatically like kind of open to other things being